monsters under your kid's pillow? Also, is AI already losing? And poisonous light. All these things coming up on today's foray into the Use Your Head podcast. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to this Friday foray into the Use Your Head podcast. I'm John McClain. Couple days late this week. My apologies, as always. Life happened. Actually, Labor Day happened, and I was a couple days behind. But I came up with some great stuff, some great topics today on the Use Your Head podcast, the show where we get together and knock gently our heads together and use them. Use our God-given, built-in ability called reason to process the news and opinions of the day. Not to be force-fed with a narrative and wander around like some kind of droid or robot or what have you. We're going to talk about droids and robots today. Interesting news on the AI front. That's coming up later on this, the Use Your Head podcast. As mentioned, I'm John McClain from Dallas, Texas. Glad to have you listening wherever you are. In the world or on the web. We are on pretty much every platform for content there is. If you know of one we're not on and you wish we were, shoot me a message at our email address, john@useyourheadpodcast.com. That's john@useyourheadpodcast.com. In addition, if you'd like to participate in the show, send me a recording. Or if you have a question, comment, concern, what have you, or just want to say howdy, I'd love to hear from you. Once again, it's john@useyourheadpodcast.com. Let's, without further ado, dive right in. Topic number one on this Friday edition of the Use Your Head podcast: monsters under your kids, not beds, under their pillow or their blankie. Or maybe in the pocket of their PJs. Yeah, there's a monster that could be ruining their minds. This first story comes from a website called Study Finds, which, by the way, not being sponsored or endorsed at all by this website, but I look at it a lot, and I have to say, this is pretty good. This is a website filled with studies that are fact-checked and verified. Now, I don't know, I haven't dug in to learn exactly what that process entails, but it seems to me it's somewhat unique. Out there on the internet. We have a lot of people publishing a lot of things, and that's perfectly fine. We have freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and you can publish whatever you want, at least right now. But this website is unique, and I always find some interesting and thought-provoking things. And so here is the title from Study Finds: How Secret Phone Use at Night is Ruining Minds of Kids as Young as 7. This article is written by the Study Find staff, but is reviewed by Steve Fink, based upon research led by Dr. Stephanie Centafonti from the University of South Australia. Okay, interesting stuff. Here goes the article. This is from Adelaide, Australia. The monsters keeping our children awake at night aren't the stuff of fairy tales or of Monsters, Inc. Remember that? That's my aside. They were in the closet on that one. No. The article continues. They're made of pixels and social media likes. A comprehensive study is pulling back the curtain on a troubling trend: nighttime phone use turning bedtime into a battleground for sleep and mental health. The research conducted down under in Australia reveals a troubling connection between late-night texting, cyberbullying, and psychological distress among kids as young as 7 years old. Scientists say the childhood rite of passage of staying up past bedtime has taken a dark turn in the digital age. I want to stop right there. I can so relate to this idea. I grew up in a house of fairly rigid discipline. Most of my friends described my parents as being strict, which I really didn't think so, but I guess compared to them. But my parents had rules. We had standards. We had boundaries. Every kid needs them. And no kid wants to admit it. No kid, unless they're fairly mature, understands the need for boundaries, but we need them. And so we had an 8 o'clock bedtime pretty late into our childhood. And I don't remember, I want to say by the time I was getting toward 14, that maybe that was relaxed a little. But there was always a bedtime. And then when I had a driver's license, there was a curfew. which is just another word for bedtime. But yeah, 8 o'clock. And so staying up past bedtime, sneaking out of bed and peeking through we had these really cool saloon doors in our 70s house. One of them went into the kitchen and the other one went into the other side of the family/living room where the TV was, where the 19-inch Magnavox was sitting right there on the stone hearth. And, Mom and Dad sat in there, watched TV until usually the 10 o'clock news, and then it was bedtime for them. I used to love to stealthily tiptoe and then belly crawl like some kind of commando, usually through the kitchen. And here's why. The kitchen had a no-wax linoleum floor, so it was not noisy. My PJs slid right across. And the swinging doors from the kitchen had a better angled view toward the TV. So I got to watch Dallas, which I wasn't allowed to watch because that was an adult show. Anyway, it just reminded me, this is a childhood rite of passage. It's true, it is. Staying up past bedtime to sneak a peek at the TV or raid the refrigerator, grab a popsicle, hoping Mom didn't count them. Now it's taken a dark turn in the digital age. Back to the story. The study was published in the journal Adolescence and analyzed data from over 53,000 Australian children between the ages of 7 and 19. So this is a large sample. For many kids, lights out is just the beginning of their nightly online activities, and the consequences are more serious than just next day drowsiness. The data collection took place between March and December of 2019, utilizing a questionnaire that examined various aspects of resilience and well-being. This survey included demographic items, risk and protective behavior items, and optional risky behavior items. To understand how the kids were feeling, the researchers used a special set of questions called the PHQ-4. This asked the kids if they had been feeling nervous, worried, sad, or not interested in things. They could answer anywhere from never to nearly every day. Sounds reasonable. The article goes on. Other questions included how often the kids used their phones at night, how well they slept, or if they had been bullied online. For example, they asked if kids got 8 hours of sleep most nights and how many times they sent messages on their phones late at night. They also asked if the kids had been bullied at school recently. One of the most striking discoveries in the study was that about a third of primary school children, defined as ages 7 through 11, and more than 60% of secondary school students, 12 to 19, reported using their phones at night at least once a week. This nighttime phone use was associated with shorter sleep duration and increased psychological distress across all age groups. But, the article continues, it's not just about losing sleep. The study also found that children who experienced cyberbullying were more likely to use their phones at night and report sleep issues and psychological distress. Approximately 15% of the children surveyed had experienced cyberbullying in the past school term, with rates peaking in early adolescence. Preteens are at higher risk for socio-emotional disorders because they are at a developmental stage where they are less prepared cognitively, behaviorally, and neurobiologically, says study co-author Dr. Stephanie Centafanti, a researcher from the University of South Australia, in a statement. All right, so let's talk about this a little bit. Let's use our heads. I'm not a child psychologist, and I'm not an expert on cyberbullying. I got the real kind of bullying, and I'm not saying cyberbullying is fake or not real or not damaging. It is. I was just saying, people used to push me around and beat me up because they didn't like the clothes I wore, or they didn't like, the haircut I had, any thousands of reasons. Bullying happened. And I went through the rites of bullying as a child. It wasn't fun, but I survived. But I also know how it feels to be bullied. It's no fun. But cyberbullying was not a thing when I was in school. I mean, we still had dial telephones in those days. So I'm looking at this and using my head. We got to find an answer because it's obvious. As wonderful an innovation as smartphone technology is, and look, I'll admit it. I use my smartphone a lot. It helps keep me on track. I probably would have a difficult time coping without the little calendar on my phone that will ding me an hour before a meeting that I've forgotten about. And I really, really like having email at my fingertips. It helps me stay connected in business and in personal and all those things. And yes, occasionally I might watch a baseball game if I'm not blacked out. MLB, different topic. So look, I like my smartphone. All right. You like yours more than likely. But these are children. Okay. Now 7 to 11, that's kids. Those are not teens. They're not even really preteens. These are children. All right. 7-year-olds are children. I'm going to ask the question. It's the pink elephant in the room, and I'm not going to answer it because it's not mine to answer, but something to use your head about, Mom and Dad. Does your 9-year-old need a smartphone? All right. I mean, if they want to play with a smartphone, I've seen parents do it all the time. Mommy, I want your phone. Okay, here, take my phone. And then they get gummy bear prints all over it and hopefully don't drop it. And they lock it up and mom and dad have to figure out what they've done to it to get it back to working. And the kid loses interest and moves on to something else. When you start getting into the 7 through 11, they don't lose interest. They get sucked in by the content that is online. And I'm just wondering if they need their own phone. If they do, then I'll ask this. Use your head, Mom and Dad. Aren't there ways to lock yourself out? There are, because I do it to myself. I'm in my 50s, and my smartphone will cut me off from social media after 15 minutes a day. I get 15 minutes to check my social medias, and then my phone says, nope, that's it, you're done. Now, there is an emergency out, but I don't use it unless, I've heard somebody's passed away and I need to get on Facebook, only in emergencies. But that 15 minutes reminds me that's enough. It's time to bail out. Can you put that on your kid's phone and perhaps lock out the emergency bailout function? Because for a kid, there's not an emergency on social media. Just saying. Use your head, Mom and Dad. Look, it's okay to take the kids' phones at bedtime. All right, get your jammies on and let's have your phones. And mommy or daddy will give it to you in the morning, if you're allowed to take it to school. If you're not, then, you can have it after school tomorrow. It's okay to do that, Mom and Dad. It's not abusive. It's not mean and it's not unreasonable. It's a boundary that a child needs. It's okay to take your kids' phones away at dinner time too. All right. Nothing saddens me more at a restaurant than seeing a family gathered around a meal and the kid is on their phone or other device, completely oblivious to anything else that's going on. That is terrible. Take the phone away from them if they don't have the discipline or they're not old enough to have the discipline to pay attention to what's important. Mom and Dad, it is actually okay for you to take that phone away anytime you want to. Use your head because there's research that is damaging your kids. Topic number 2 on the Use Your Head podcast on this Friday. John McLean, thanks for tuning in. This story really surprised me, and it probably shouldn't have because I've been talking about it for a while. Is AI losing already? That didn't take long. I've been saying for a while that AI's acceptability, okay, that the acceptability of these new AI tools, and I'm talking about the ones that are taking away jobs and interrupting livelihoods and these types of things and causing security risks, all that. Will it be accepted is going to depend on the marketplace. It's going to depend on money. All right, markets will determine whether people are going to buy into this stuff, buy devices that have this technology baked in, or computers or phones that have this stuff baked in, or if they're going to reject it and not want the stuff. Here's an interesting article from the Associated Press from Paul Wiseman. AI may not steal many jobs after all. It may just make workers more efficient. Interesting stuff. Let's see what it says. The widespread assumption that AI chatbots will inevitably replace service workers the way physical robots took many factory and warehouse jobs isn't becoming reality in any widespread way. Imagine a customer service center that speaks your language, no matter what it is. Alorca, or no, that's not how it says. It's spelled Alarica. I think it's Alarica. In any event, it's in Irvine, in California. Alarica is a company in Irvine that runs customer service centers around the world, call centers, okay? Has introduced an artificial intelligence translation tool that lets its reps talk with customers who speak 200 different languages and 75 dialects. I think that's sort of cool, right? There are a lot of different languages, and it's nice to have people or things, computers that can speak them. I don't know. Haven't thought on that much. Anyway, continuing on, this article says this. So an Alarica representative who speaks, say, only Spanish can field a complaint about a bulky printer or an incorrect bank statement from a Cantonese speaker in Hong Kong. Alarica wouldn't need to hire a rep who speaks Cantonese. Such is the power of AI, and potentially the threat. Perhaps companies won't need as many employees and will slash some jobs if chatbots can handle the workload instead. But the thing is, Alarica isn't cutting jobs. It's still hiring, in fact, aggressively. The experience at Alarica and at other companies, including furniture retailer IKEA, suggests that AI may not prove to be the job killer that many people fear. Instead, the technology might turn out to be more like breakthroughs of the past, the steam engine, electricity, the internet. That is, eliminate some jobs while creating others, and probably making workers more productive in general to the eventual benefit of themselves, their employers, and the economy. Okay, time out there. I still, before you think I've jumped the shark on AI, I still think that idea right there, and that's not new, we've been hearing this for a long time, I think is pretty grossly optimistic. All right, I'm not saying it's not going to happen, it's impossible, but I think the odds are pretty good, just knowing, using my head, that it probably is not going to be the case. However, taking that with the grain of salt that I take it, the article continues. Nick Bunker is an economist at the Indeed hiring lab. Indeed is the online job posting site, right? Said he thinks that AI will affect many, many jobs, maybe every job indirectly to some extent, but I don't think it's going to lead to, say, mass unemployment. We have seen other big technological events in our history, and those didn't lead to a large rise in unemployment. Technology destroys, but also creates. There will be new jobs that come about. All right, I agree with Nick. All right, I think he's right. I don't think this is going to be necessarily the end of humanity yet. It will be the end of some jobs, but I think, again, it's optimistic, but I'm kind of an optimist. I think that maybe they may be onto something here. The article continues, at its core, AI empowers machines to perform tasks previously thought to require human intelligence. The technology has existed in early versions for decades, having emerged with a problem-solving computer program, the Logic Theorist, built in the 1950s at what's now Carnegie Mellon University. Have you heard about that? I'd never heard of that before. In the 1950s, there was a computer program called the Logic Theorist that was a very crude and early version of decision-making computers, AI. Interesting. More importantly, think of voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, which, by the way, since they mentioned them, I wasn't going to bring this up, but they did it, so it's their fault. I can't stand these things. I have turned off all those things in my phone. I've turned them off in my house. My security company in my home requires me to use this Google thing that, you can say, hey, I don't say, hey, Google. I don't like talking to these things. And I tell you what, it amuses the heck out of me when I see my family and friends struggle with them. They'll ask one of these boxes to play a certain song. It seldom, if ever, gets it right. And it's just hysterically funny to me. But anyway, more recently, think of voice assistants like Siri and Alexa, or IBM's chess-playing computer Deep Blue. If you're older, you'll remember that. It managed to beat world chess champion Garry Kasparov in 1997. So what they're basically saying, and again, I think that the author here is trying to kind of soften the rough edges of AI, trying to prove a point. I'm not faulting him. He's trying to prove a point here. I don't know. I still think that's kind of optimistic. I don't consider Siri, for example, to be artificial intelligence. And here's why. Siri is just responding to human input. I'm talking about generative artificial intelligence that just does things on its own. It decides that something needs to be done, and without human input. I'm talking about after its initial programming, of course. without human input, it turns up the thermostat, or it sets a timer, or it, issues codes to launch a missile or something. God forbid. Article continues. AI really burst into public consciousness in 2022 when OpenAI introduced ChatGPT, the generative AI tool that can conduct conversations, write computer code, compose music. Yeah. Craft essays and supply endless streams of information. The arrival of generative AI has raised worries that chatbots will replace freelance writers, editors, coders, telemarketers, audiobook narrators. I added that. Customer service reps, paralegals, many, many more. AI, this is Sam Altman. Remember Sam? Sam is the CEO of OpenAI. This is a quote from Sam. He says, AI is going to eliminate a lot of current jobs, and this is going to change the way that a lot of current jobs function. He said that, by the way, in May at a discussion at MIT. Yet the widespread assumption that AI chatbots will inevitably replace service workers, the way physical robots took many factory and warehouse jobs, isn't becoming reality in any widespread way, not yet anyway, and maybe it never will. The White House Council of Economic Advisors said last month that it found, quote, little evidence that AI will negatively impact overall employment, end quote. The advisors noted that history shows technology typically makes companies more productive, speeding economic growth, and creating new types of jobs in unexpected ways. Time to use our heads here. Look, I know that a lot of comparisons are being made about, great innovations in our history, especially in the 20th century, right? Imagine what life was like in 1900 and what it was like in 1999. It was unrecognizable in that short 99-year period in history. The miracle of microtechnologies, transistors, and then microprocessors, and all, it has just turned the world on its head. And it has done miraculous things. All right. And I'm not saying I wish I was sitting in a cave, killing my dinner with a club. What I'm saying is that we have to be very careful about these technologies. And so when people like this say, hey, listen, there's nothing to worry about. When the White House says, listen, there's nothing to worry about here. We've seen innovations. We had the steam engine. All right. And we all still found jobs. Yes, that's true. But weren't we putting horses out of work with the steam engine? I mean, you could argue, yes, maybe some farriers. If you're scoring at home, a farrier is someone that takes care of a horse's feet, puts shoes on them, clips their hooves and all that kind of thing. We may have lost some of them because we didn't have as many horses. I just think that when we have computers that can think purportedly in a human-like way, that is a different argument. I think it's an almost apples and oranges comparison. I don't think it's the same thing as saying, when we got cell phones, then we didn't need long distance anymore. I used to be a computer programmer at a long distance company, which is now still in existence, but not in its original form. It's now a completely wireless company, but we used to do the programming for the mainframe system that did the phone bills for long distance, landline. And if you're young, you may not know what that is. We used to have phones that had cords on them, and you could stretch them out, they'd get all tangled up, and we had to pay to call outside of our area code, and sometimes to call within our area code. Yes, that went away. But the thing is, those people that knew how to program computers, they just moved us to a different part. Most of us were moved to wireless because they still have phone bills. So we were just moved to a different part. This is different. Okay, when you have a computer that doesn't need a human to say, all right, do this and then that, and if that, do that, and then stop, go. And then the computer does its thing in a lightning fast and accurate way. That's a wonderful thing. When a computer, when I'm asleep at 3 o'clock in the morning and a computer goes, let's see what I'm going to do tonight. Based upon programming, but initiating its own instructions, that is a far, far different article. And that's where my optimism stops when it comes to AI. All right. So look, I understand what Mr. Wiseman's saying here. And look, he's trying to be optimistic. He's trying to get people to look at the bright side of life. And I appreciate that. I honestly do. But I would argue that the argument that the White House counsel is making and that ChatGPT is making and that the anecdotal evidence that this Irvine company called Alarica is discovering, like, hey, listen, we're actually hiring, okay, fine. But that's because of a language program. I don't know. I have no crystal ball. All right. This is anecdotal to be sure, but I will say this. There is some hope as we look to the future with AI. Your mileage may vary. Let me know what you think, by the way. John at useyourheadpodcast.com. Thanks for tuning in to the Use Your Head podcast. I'm going to apologize in advance of topic 3. It comes from Newsweek. Yeah, Newsweek. But it's a good article. It's written by Newsweek's, what is the title here? Senior science reporter, Pandora Dewan. Pandora Dewan, okay? And I saw this and it caught my eye immediately. And it kind of might relate to topic number 1 today. The reason it caught my eye because of the first word in the title, Alzheimer's. Okay, now, for me personally, that is one of the scariest words in the English language. And I don't know if you've ever known someone personally or watched a family walk through the progression of Alzheimer's disease. It is, I'll say horrifying. That doesn't cover it. It is a awful way to end things. It is a terrible disease. And I, for many years, have donated money to research because I want Alzheimer's to be gone forever. They're making progress and they're learning things about it. And this article is one of those things we're going to talk about. But whenever I see anything about Alzheimer's, it's one of those, I screech to a halt and I take note because it's horrible. It's one of the things in the world that we haven't figured out yet, and we need to. Here's the title from Newsweek, and again, it's written by senior science reporter Pandora Dewan. Alzheimer's. Map shows U.S. states where newly revealed risk factor is worse. By the way, Pandora, that's a great title that you wrote. That sucks anyone in because she doesn't say what the newly revealed risk factor is, and it's got a map. And I love maps, so here we go. Excessive light pollution may increase our risk of Alzheimer's disease, new research has warned. These associations are particularly pronounced among younger members of the population and emphasize the importance of avoiding light exposure at night. Put a little, those little sticky flags, put one of those on your phone, and we're going to come back to that in just a second. Article continues. Alzheimer's affects roughly 5.8 million Americans, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The progressive disease is the most common form of dementia and is associated with memory loss, cognitive decline in regions of the brain involved in thought, memory, and language. Like I say, if you've ever known anyone that has faced this, it is it's horrifying. It's dehumanizing. It's terrible. There are numerous factors that contribute to the development of Alzheimer's disease, says Robin Vogt-Zawala. Well, I just completely blew that, didn't I? Let's start over again. Robin Vogt-Zawala, an associate professor at Illinois' Rush University Medical Center and the lead author on this research. She told Newsweek, it is the constellation of these factors in totality that determine the risk of Alzheimer's disease. So basically what she's saying is, look, don't freak out. If you live in a big city where there's lots of light, that doesn't mean you're going to get it. It's part of a big totality, a constellation, she calls it, of factors. And as they're researching this thing and trying to get down the nitty gritty to knock this out, they're learning all these factors. Article goes on. In a new study published in the journal Frontiers in Neuroscience, Vogt-Zawala and colleagues studied light pollution levels across 48 U.S. states and its association with Alzheimer's disease. What they found was that high levels of nightly light pollution were strongly associated with Alzheimer's prevalence. More so, now this blew me away, check this out, more so than alcohol abuse, depression, and obesity, which have all been shown to increase our risk of developing Alzheimer's. Now, this stunned me. as they're doing this research, and they find, and this is research, researcher language, but they talk about strong association. So we're talking about correlation, on the graph of all these data that they're collecting. More so than alcohol abuse, depression, and obesity. All three of those are epidemic right now, right? I mean, obesity, depression, alcoholism. Look. And they've all been associated strongly with the development of Alzheimer's later in life. They're saying now that they're discovering that nightly light pollution is beating them all. Stunning, to me anyway. A map shows which states saw the highest levels of light pollution. And this is one of those rare moments when I wish you could see me. I'm going to give you a link that you can go find this map if you want to look at it. But I'll describe the action to you. This is awkward for an audio thing, but nevertheless, it's a map of the lower 48. Okay. And it's color coded. The redder you are, the more light pollution is observed. And the map, the title of the legend is Average Nighttime Light Intensity. And they're talking about, I can't see, this is really small. It's 10 to the 9th power watts per steradian per square centimeter. This is scientific stuff. I don't understand it, but basically they color coded it for guys like me. Basically red bad, blue good on this map. And then there's purples and there's oranges, but the map is interesting because with the exception of Maine and Vermont and perhaps West Virginia to a degree, the entire eastern seaboard is being bombarded by nightly light pollution. Now, that makes sense in places like Boston and New York City and Atlanta and Miami, but there's a lot of parts, and I'm talking about North Carolina and Virginia and Kentucky, and a lot of these states are, apparently there's a lot of nighttime light pollution out there. And states like Georgia. Georgia's a big state, and there's big cities in there, but not all of it. And this is an average, of course. Looking at the other states on the other end of the spectrum, these are the ones that are kind of a navy blue type color. Maine and Vermont, hardly any light pollution. Oregon, see, that one surprised me. I thought it'd have a little more, but it doesn't. Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Utah, Idaho, New Mexico. These are all states that have very low levels of light pollution. Texas, where I live, is the next to the lowest. So that makes me feel a little bit better. And again, whatever goes into these calculations of these, steradian per square centimeter, I don't know how that's measured, but it may have to do with the size of the state and the population within. Texas is massive. We have a lot of people here, but there's a lot of room for all those people. Massachusetts also has a lot of people, not as much room. So that part makes a little bit of sense. I will tell you, you can find this map on at Newsweek's website. Just look for, just search for light pollution map, and you should be able to find it. It's kind of something to glance at. Pretty interesting. So there's another quote here from Vote Zoala. She says this: "I believe that light pollution impacts health generally, including cognitive health via disruption of circadian rhythms. Our group has shown that disruption of circadian rhythms disrupts the intestinal microbiome and promotes inflammation, which can drive neurodegeneration. However, more research is needed to test this hypothesis." So she's hypothesizing here, highly qualified. The word that caught me here is inflammation. And, when we use our head, we know that inflammation is the source of pain and disease in the body. All right. The body does not want to be inflamed. And when we can keep it not inflamed, that's why super athletes take those horrible ice baths after they, run the marathon or do the Spartan race or whatever they're doing. Interesting stuff. Those under 65 appear, and this will wrap it up here. Those under 65 appeared to be particularly vulnerable to the effects of light pollution levels, with light pollution intensity showing a stronger association with Alzheimer's disease than any other risk factors studied. All right, I promised before we quit we'd go back to the beginning because something caught my eye in the very first statement, actually the second statement of this article. These associations are particularly pronounced among younger members of the population and emphasize the importance of avoiding light exposure at night. Now, DeWan doesn't specify there, but she does mention later on about under 65. And typically, not always, but typically we find Alzheimer's in the elderly, right? This is something grandma and grandpa gets. And so when I first saw that, I thought younger members, they talking about kids here? Well, no, but not yet. Could the light we're getting at night from our phones under our covers, or our iPads or whatever we're looking at, tablets, could that be a risk factor? So I'm sure somebody's going to research that. I'm pretty sure the big tech companies that sell these devices won't be funding that research, but it would be interesting to know. To me, this is a case for flyover country. When you get in an airplane and you fly somewhere and you see just darkness underneath you, no lights at all, or there's light, there's no light pollution out there. And if you've never been out some night where there's truly no light pollution and looked at the sky on a cloudless night, you are missing out on one of the greatest parts of creation. It is stunning, and the darker, the better. So yeah, poisonous light. Get out in flyover country and use your head and think, you know what, this is good for my health and it's fun too. Go camping, for crying out loud. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you once again for indulging me in the 2-day delay this week. We'll be back with fresh content next week. Subscribe and tell a friend. And together, whatever we read, whatever we think about, whether in dark or in the light, let's use our head, the one God gave to us. Thanks for listening. I'm John McClain. See you next time. Bye-bye.